Hello and welcome to the Science Club Daily, and I'm here once again with Tina. Hello.
Hey, it's great to be back again on another daily show.
Yeah, so these daily ones are kind of like essentially stuff that don't make it to the show, I guess, the main weekly show.
Yes.
And we just kind of want to give the YouTube people kind of a dose of daily science, and that's what this show is about. So today, I guess I was going to say this week, but it's
today.
It's this week and today. So this research has been published recently, and it's kind of interesting because we're seeing this increase in cannabis research now that it's legal in a lot of places, and that includes Europe, where this consortium from a lot of countries, which I kind of would expect, the Netherlands, of course.
Of course, yeah. The capital of weed usage in the world, basically.
Yeah, Belgium. Australia, interestingly.
Well, not surprising for us, seeing that we've actually seen a lot of work being done where we work.
Yeah, it's interesting
because usage. Cannabis oil, I believe, was what was being done.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is for us is that it's actually not legalized here yet, but we grow a lot of cannabis for places where it is legal.
Right, I see.
Yeah.
I did not know that. So,
yeah,
good to know.
The Germany and the US were also involved, and what this study is about is essentially seeing if cannabis use, and particularly THC, because it's quite common now for people to use THC in like e-cigarette like vaporizers, and just kind of get the THC specifically. So they were essentially looking at whether cannabis use can lead to the formation of false memories.
Okay, that is interesting. So what we know about cannabis before is that, people have mentioned things of a loss of inhibition, which is the early stages that you take. And then further on, you would actually develop some sort of paranoia, I believe, is the symptom after that.
Yeah, so some people do get it quite bad, yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting, actually, because we never actually considered it to have any sort of effect on memory so far, at least not to my knowledge. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
How does that work?
Because there are certainly some stereotypes about regular users.
Yes.
Like the sort of conspiracy theory, the man is coming to get you, man. Like, that's kind of a stereotype.
Yeah.
This could kind of explain that behaviour a little bit, which we'll kind of talk about in the story. So this was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences too. So this is a good journal that publishes good research. And it was done properly, double-blinded, placebo-controlled. So that basically means that the people who did the study didn't know until after all the analysis was done which group was which. And that's pretty important, especially when there are things like this are a little subjective where you don't have a binary answer per se.
Yep.
So I think it's easy for researchers to have this kind of bias where they kind of see what they want to see.
Yeah.
Which is kind of one of the things that this replication crisis in research, especially psychological research, came from. So yeah, essentially we talked a little bit about the previous studies into cannabis, and then memory loss is another one, I guess, as well. And that's actually a lot of mind-altering effects seem to have this, and memory distortion, where you have a memory and it gets distorted. Humans are quite susceptible to this anyway, but apparently smoking cannabis actually increases this. So essentially they were looking more specifically at THC though, and not just, smoking. And they were looking at people who use vaporizers specifically. And essentially it's been suggested previously that they've been more susceptible to false memories. And so they wanted to test this. So essentially, each of these groups was given some THC, except for the control group. So people were given a vaporizer, I guess, and they didn't know whether it had the THC or not. And 64 people is actually...
It's a good number for a study of this magnitude.
Yeah.
Or this nature, rather.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, they did a bunch of memory tests, and one of those was just kind of reciting a list of words, which is the classic memory test.
Yeah.
They give you a list of words, they do a bunch of stuff, and then they ask you to repeat them again.
Yeah.
And the other one was that and I find this really interesting because this is the modern bit. They had a virtual reality-based experience where essentially they were the spectator in a fight.
Okay.
It was a fake fight, I guess, but
virtual reality.
They were on a train and they sort of had this VR experience. And then in the other one, they actually took part in a virtual reality simulation where they were the character and they were actually the ones taking part in a crime. In this case, stealing money from someone's purse,
right?
Which is kind of a surreal experience, I guess. And then basically what they wanted to do is they when you do memory tests, you kind of have to ask people questions, right? So, do you remember this? What did you notice about this? And this has been shown time and time again in research, just into testimony in general. The way you phrase the question is really important.
Yeah.
Because if you introduce information, you can actually make people misremember. And there's been entire court cases where like they've had to be thrown out because the people who were doing the the interrogation just kind of subtly guided the people towards an answer.
Yep.
And there was a really good TV series I saw once where they basically staged a crime scene, and they actually had even people on the jury were there to trigger the other people into misremembering.
Right, I see.
So obviously you can see how this would be quite problematic, especially people who might be called to be in a court case, basically. So essentially, while they did the questioning, the researchers did their best to try and assure the subjects that they weren't being messed with, even though they were. But obviously, you kind of have to do that as well. So the interesting thing is that when they looked at the results, the study showed that smoking THC actually pretty clearly increased the subjects' susceptibility to forming these false memories by being fed bad information, essentially. And I think, as I said, kind of alluded to at the start, this is kind of interesting, isn't it? Because as humans, we like to think we have a tape recorder memory, but really it's very narrative based, and your memory changes all the time.
Yep.
Do you have any memories where you kind of feel like you remember it, but actually you've just seen a picture or a video of the event?
Yeah.
And you're not really remembering being there so much as having seen the event happen on a picture or a video. Your brain kind of creates a memory of the event.
Yeah, well, in my opinion at least, it's more linked to your emotions to a particular scene, for example.
Exactly.
And in fact, that's really what drives you. For example, if you had a memory back when you were a kid and you were really good at futsal. For example, I thought I was pretty good at football back then when I was a kid. But that's just my feelings at the time of being really good at the sport.
Yeah.
But if you asked anybody who observed me, I was probably rubbish at the game.
Yeah.
And it's just that ties to emotion that alter what you remember. So, and I believe, I guess in this particular case as well, because they used the virtual simulation of a crime.
Yeah.
Now, a person who actually has personally done a crime versus a person who has never done a single crime in their life before.
Yeah.
Now, they would remember that situation a little bit differently. If you have never done a crime in your life, you would say, oh, no, this is not me. I'm living somebody else's memory.
Right.
That would be it.
Yeah.
But if that person has actually conducted a crime before, and you'll be I probably did it, Probably not, but, probably equal chance I could have done it,
Yeah, and that's an important point because the researchers brought up this idea that one of the issues could be if you're interviewing someone who has been taking cannabis, they might be more likely to essentially falsely confess to a crime by having their memory kind of altered.
Yeah.
And then...
But being fed information, for example, or being suggested that's what actually really happened. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that feeds into that conspiracy narrative where you may witness events while you're under the influence of THC, and then because of its kind of memory-altering effects, you might actually misremember something. Maybe you're more susceptible to thinking that someone across the street was watching you, or performing a certain act that in your brain you just kind of later on, maybe you just watched a movie later, and because you're on the THC, your brain meshes the two memories. I mean, that's the kind of way that memories can be manipulated like this.
And I remember seeing somewhere, I can't remember where it was, but somebody mentioned paranoia. One of the hallmarks of having paranoia is seeing patterns when none truly exist.
Exactly.
And in the case where, when you do something and you always expect a bystander to be staring at you, and you assume they are watching you, where instead they could just be staring off into the distance.
Exactly.
And that all feeds into it, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting research, and I think now that we have more one of the things that has happened with a lot of illegal drugs is that we actually haven't been able to do the research on it either. You might think that research would fall into a different category, but there's a lot of restrictions on any drug that is illegal, essentially. And that's why research into something like, say, ketamine for depression has taken so long, and, LSD and mushrooms and that kind of stuff. They've all been shown recently to maybe have some beneficial effects if the dose is right. So I think we're going to see a lot more research like this, and it's going to be very interesting to kind of see how this plays out in the end.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it.